my daughter shouted, "You will either serve my husband or leave this house," I did not react with anger. I simply smiled, picked up my suitcase, and walked away, leaving behind the home I had built with my life's effort. She expected me to break down like before, but this time everything had changed. A week later, I saw 22 missed calls on my phone, and that was only the beginning. They would come to regret their words and actions. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and share in the comments where you are listening from. The keys were still warm in my palm as I pushed open the front door, grocery bags cutting into my wrists. The Saturday afternoon light streamed through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the living room, a sight that usually comforted me. Not today. Harry was stretched out in my leather recliner, Martha's last gift to me before cancer took her. His feet rested on the chair, a half-empty beer bottle dangling from his hand. The remote lay on his stomach as though he owned the place, which perhaps he believed he did. Without looking up from the basketball game, he muttered, "Grab me another beer while you're up." I set the grocery bags down carefully, the weight of the cartons and loaves pressing red lines into my palms. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he replied, still watching the screen. "Corona. Not that cheap stuff you drink." A cold heaviness filled my chest. I had bought those Coronas just for him, using money from my Social Security check on beer I would never touch. "Harry, I just walked in. I need to put these groceries away first." Now he looked at me with that familiar expression implying I was being unreasonable. "What's the big deal? You're already standing. I'm comfortable." "The big deal," I said firmly, "is that this is my house." Harry's feet hit the floor with a thud as he stood, using his height to intimidate. At 30, he was larger and stronger, but I had faced tougher men long before he was born. "Your house? Funny. Your daughter and I live here. We pay the bills with my money." He stepped closer, beer still in hand. "Look, Clark, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. If you want to keep living here, you play along. Simple as that." The kitchen door opened. Tiffany appeared, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, a dish towel in hand. She took in the scene, Harry towering over me, the tension sharp in the air. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone carrying that familiar warning I remembered from her teenage years. "Your father's being difficult," Harry answered, without looking away. "I asked him for a beer and he's turning it into a big issue." Tiffany's eyes met mine with disappointment, as though I were a child misbehaving. "Dad, just get him the beer. It's not worth arguing about." But Harry pressed further, stepping close enough that I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "Here's how it works, Clark. You live in our house. You contribute. That means when I ask you to do something, you do it. No questions, no excuses." "Our house?" I kept my voice steady though my heart raced. "That's right," Tiffany said firmly, standing beside her husband in unity. "Dad, you need to decide now. Either you support Harry and do as he asks, or you pack your things and leave." Her words hung in the air like smoke. I searched her face for any trace of the little girl who once curled into my lap during storms. All I saw was Harry's entitled glare reflected back at me. "All right," I said quietly. Harry smirked, convinced he had won. "Good. Now, about that beer, I'll pack." His smirk faded instantly. Tiffany's mouth opened in shock, as though she expected me to apologize and obey. Instead, I turned toward the hallway, leaving the grocery bags behind. Behind me, I heard Harry's sharp inhale and Tiffany's soft, "Dad, wait," but I kept walking toward my bedroom, my steps steady on the hardwood floors Martha and I had refinished 2 decades earlier. The suitcase came down from the closet with a soft thump. I had bought it for our honeymoon to Yellowstone, back when Martha was alive and the future seemed wide open. Now it sat empty, ready to carry what was left of my life in this house. I packed deliberately. Underwear, socks, 3 changes of clothes. Not everything, just enough. From the living room came the muffled sound of whispers, Harry's voice sharp above Tiffany's softer ones. They were deciding how to handle my unexpected defiance. My hands moved steadily, folding shirts, rolling, as I slipped Martha's photo into a side pocket wrapped in tissue. My medications, reading glasses, and a small leather journal where I tracked expenses followed. When I wheeled the suitcase down the hallway, they fell silent. Harry sat back in his chair, but alert now. Tiffany leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, trying to look firm, though her uncertainty showed. Neither of them said goodbye. My old Buick started on the first try, as dependable as ever. I backed out of the driveway without glancing at the house, without checking if they were watching. The 30-minute drive to Pine Lodge gave me time to reflect. Memories came flooding back. Tiffany's college tuition, $40,000 a year at the private school she insisted on. I had worked overtime at the bank for 4 years, reviewing extra loan applications, my hands cramping from the paperwork. Her wedding had cost $25,000. Harry's family couldn't afford their share, so I quietly covered it all to avoid their embarrassment. The reception, the flowers, her gown, everything had to be perfect for my little girl. Then the house, $80,000 from my retirement savings for their down payment. Because that's what fathers did. That's what Martha would have wanted. The monthly payments followed, $200 for the mortgage, $300 for utilities, $500 for groceries whenever money ran short. Piece by piece, my Social Security check was consumed by their lives. I convinced myself it was love. Pine Lodge Motel sat at the town's edge, a low building with faded paint and a flickering neon sign. The room was small but tidy. A bed, a chair, a tiny table by the window. I set my suitcase on the rack and sat heavily on the mattress. The silence here was different, not the comfort of home, but the hollow stillness of a temporary space. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts, banks, insurance, credit cards, numbers etched in memory from 30 years in finance. Tomorrow was Sunday, but some tasks could still begin. Some calls could still be made. I placed my laptop on the small table and signed into online banking. The numbers on the screen reflected checking, savings, and retirement accounts, a lifetime of discipline, careful planning, and years of setting aside small comforts to provide for my family. The cursor blinked in the search bar, waiting for my next step. Sunday morning was gray and overcast, perfectly mirroring my mood. I spread my documents across the motel table like a strategist preparing for battle. Bank statements, insurance forms, legal papers, all neatly arranged, all within reach. My first call went to First National Bank. While Sunday services were limited, automated systems never rested. After navigating through the phone menu, a representative finally answered, "Good morning, Mr. Miller. How can I assist you today?" "I need to cancel the automatic mortgage payment for 847 Pine Street, account ending 4729. There was a pause followed by the sound of typing. "Sir, this payment has been active for 5 years. Are you certain you want to stop it?" "Yes, absolutely." "May I ask the reason?" "The homeowners no longer qualify for my financial support." More typing. "Very well, Mr. Miller. The payment has been canceled, effective immediately. You will receive written confirmation within 3 business days." The second call was simpler. Geico had insured both their vehicles under my policy for 3 years, Harry's Silverado and Tiffany's Honda. I had been paying $280 each month for cars I never drove and accidents I would never cause. "I need to remove 2 vehicles from my policy," I told the agent. "My daughter and her husband will need their own coverage. When would you like this to take effect?" "Today." The credit cards took longer. Tiffany was an authorized user on 3 of my accounts, Visa, MasterCard, and Costco's store card. Every month I had been covering $500 on balances I hadn't created, for purchases I never made. "Mr. Miller, removing authorized users will require them to apply for their own credit," the Visa representative explained. "Outstanding balances will remain your responsibility, but they will no longer be able to charge." "I understand. Remove them immediately." Each call felt like lifting a burden from my shoulders. My 3 decades in banking had taught me the systems, the procedures, and the right language to use. Every step I took was completely within my rights. The life insurance change required written paperwork, but I began the process. $100,000 once intended for Tiffany, a safeguard for my family's future. But the meaning of family had shifted. By noon, I had made 8 calls. Mortgage payments halted, insurance canceled, credit cards blocked, and automatic transfers stopped. Each one closed with polite conversations and confirmation numbers. I leaned back in the motel chair reviewing my notes, confirmation numbers, reference codes, effective dates, a paper trail of financial independence. My phone sat silent on the table. No missed calls, no urgent messages. They hadn't realized yet. They would only notice when the first payment failed, when the first bill arrived with their names on it instead of mine. I shut the laptop and looked out the window. Across the parking lot, an elderly man loaded suitcases into a pickup truck while his wife guided him with quiet efficiency. Perhaps they were heading home from a visit with grandchildren, or finally beginning a long postponed vacation. I envied their ease, their practiced rhythm. Martha and I had once shared that. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I let it ring. The week passed quietly for me, though not for them. At Pine Lodge, I settled into a simple routine. Coffee from the lobby, breakfast at the nearby diner, long walks through Kalispell's calm neighborhoods. My phone collected missed calls like unwanted tokens. By Wednesday, 12 messages. By Friday, 22. I played them in order, hearing the shift from confusion to anger to desperation. The first were casual. Tiffany wondering if there had been a banking mistake with the mortgage payment. Harry leaving curt notes about the lapsed insurance. By midweek, panic had set in. "Dad, what is happening?" Tiffany's voice trembled with frustration. "The bank says you stopped the payment. They want the full amount by Friday or they'll start foreclosure." Harry's tone grew harsher. "Clark, you need to fix this now. I've got people asking questions about my insurance. You're making us look irresponsible." By the end, their messages bordered on pleading. Tiffany cried, promising they would work something out if I only called. Harry softened his approach, saying he had spoken too harshly and wanted to make things right. I deleted each message after listening, feeling little more than mild curiosity at their growing desperation. On Thursday morning, there was a knock at my motel door. Through the peephole, I saw them, Tiffany in a wrinkled sweater, Harry in work clothes, both with tired faces that revealed sleepless nights. I opened the door but did not invite them in. "Dad." Tiffany's eyes were rimmed with red. Her usual calm broke. "We need to talk." "About what?" Harry demanded, his face red with anger. "About the fact that you're trying to ruin our lives over some pointless argument about beer." "I'm not ruining anything," I replied evenly. "I'm simply done paying for your lives." "The mortgage, Clark." Harry's voice rose. "You can't just stop paying the mortgage, that's our house." "Actually, it's my house. My name is on the deed. My signature on the loan. You two were only guests." Tiffany grabbed Harry's arm as he moved closer to the door. "Dad, please, we can work this out. Harry was wrong to speak to you that way, we both were, but you can't just leave us without any notice or discussion." "You gave me an ultimatum," I reminded her. "Do what Harry says or get out." "Those were your exact words." "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did." I looked at my daughter, but she felt like a stranger. "You meant every word. You just didn't think I'd choose the second option." Harry tried a new approach, his tone forced calm. "Look, we all said things we didn't mean. But this is about our home, our credit, our lives. You can't just walk away." "I can, and I already have." I began closing the door. "You wanted me gone, so I left. You wanted independence, now you have it." "Dad, wait." Tiffany's voice cracked. "What about family? What about everything we've shared?" I paused, seeing the desperation in her face. For a moment, I remembered the little girl who once helped me rake leaves, who brought me dandelions from the yard. But that little girl had grown into someone who allowed her husband to humiliate her father in his own home. "Family goes both ways, sweetheart," I said quietly. "I spent 5 years supporting both of you. When it was my turn to be supported, you chose him instead." Harry's calm slipped. You crazy old man, you can't just... I can call the police if you keep raising your voice, I cut in. This is private property, and you're disturbing the peace. They both stared at me, probably seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Not the soft-hearted father, not the walking bank account, but a man who finally learned to say no. Harry pulled Tiffany toward the car. Come on, we'll handle this ourselves. They left, Harry's swagger replaced with worry, Tiffany glancing back as though she didn't recognize me. I watched them drive away, then closed the door and returned to my laptop. There were still calls to make, accounts to settle. Ending a relationship took work. I needed coffee and a clear head. The diner on Main Street had always been my refuge when Martha was alive. After her appointments, we'd meet there and share apple pie, talking about small things. That Tuesday morning, I walked the familiar 3 blocks, my breath visible in the cold mountain air. Routine steadied me after yesterday's confrontation. I had gone through my paperwork again, reviewing bank statements like a general studying maps. The diner bell chimed as I entered. The smell of coffee and bacon wrapped around me, the comfort I wanted. I had just settled into my usual booth when a voice called, Clark Miller. Well, I'll be damned. Bob Harrison stood, newspaper under his arm. We'd worked at First National together for 15 years before he transferred to the main branch. He managed commercial loans, I handled personal accounts, but we'd shared enough breaks to become friends. Bob. I shook his hand. Good to see you. He slid into the opposite seat. Haven't seen you since Martha's service. Heard you moved to Pine Lodge. Everything all right? The waitress arrived with coffee before I could answer. I used the pause to think. Bob was trustworthy, but he was also a banker. Family situation, I said at last. Needed some space. Bob studied me, then said, That son-in-law of yours tried to pull a trick on us a few months ago. My cup froze mid-air. What kind of trick? He wanted a home equity loan on your house, $50,000, claimed it was his property, even brought in documents. The diner noise seemed to fade. My house? That's right. The paperwork looked official, but when we ran the title search, it all came back to you. Clean title, no co-signers. Bob shook his head. I set my cup down carefully. When was this? December, maybe January. I handled the case myself because of the amount. Clark, this wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate fraud. The documents were forged. The realization hit hard. 3 months ago, Harry had already been planning to steal from me. This wasn't desperation. It was calculated deception. Did you report it? We rejected the application and flagged him. Legally, since no money changed hands, it's a gray area. But I kept copies of everything. I shook my head, remembering all the bills I'd paid, the dinners where Harry complained about money while secretly plotting against me. What was he going to use the money for? According to the application, home improvements, but word is Harry's got gambling debts. Big ones. How big? Jim Morrison might know. You remember Detective Morrison? He said Harry's a regular at Glacier Peaks Casino. I did remember Jim. Church committee, daughter in Tiffany's class. If he had said it, it was true. Bob, I appreciate you telling me. I pulled out my wallet to pay for the untouched coffee. Clark, be cautious. A man who forged documents to steal from family could resort to worse when cornered. My walk back to Pine Lodge was filled with racing thoughts. Harry's demand for beer money and lack of respect suddenly became clearer. He had already targeted me as a convenient source of cash for his gambling habit. His ultimatum wasn't about control. It was about preserving access to money he believed he could take. Back at the motel, I opened my laptop and created a file labeled Harry Thompson Evidence. Bob's revelation was only the start. If Harry had lied about this, what else was hidden? With the courthouse closing at 5 p.m., I had just 1 hour to file documents that could change everything. I drove directly from the diner to the Flathead County Courthouse, an imposing brick building that once intimidated me but now felt like an ally. The clerk's office, staffed by a middle-aged woman, processed my eviction notice with steady professionalism. Mr. Miller, you understand this is your daughter's residence? She asked while reviewing the deed and documents. It's my property. I explained. The residents violated our verbal agreement requiring respect and contribution to household expenses. Both were ignored. She stamped the papers firmly. The 30-day notice begins today. If contested, there will be a hearing. Otherwise, the sheriff will finalize the process after the deadline. When I asked how soon they would receive it, she replied, usually within 48 hours. I left with the documents in hand, supported by legal authority. No more manipulation. Everything was now official. My next step was the police station. Detective Jim Morrison's office was tucked in the back, cluttered with filing cabinets and stained paperwork. He looked older than before, more gray, deeper lines, but his handshake remained strong. "Clark, what brings you here?" he asked. "I'm gathering information. Bob Harrison mentioned you might know about Harry Thompson's gambling." His expression sharpened. "Your son-in-law? What's the situation?" I explained Harry's ultimatum, my departure, and the discovery of attempted loan fraud. Jim listened carefully, making occasional notes. "Harry's known at Glacier Peaks," Jim said. "Regular poker player, lately betting higher. I'd estimate his debts at $18,000 to $20,000, owed to both lenders and people who don't involve law enforcement." The number shocked me. Harry had lived in my house, eaten my food, demanded respect, while losing enough money to buy a car. "How long before they escalate?" I asked. "Most give 3 months. Harry has been stalling 6 weeks. His time is running out." I left with a clearer picture. The gambling explained his desperation, his fraudulent attempt against my house, and his aggression toward me. I wasn't just convenient. I was his last hope. That evening, back in my room, I reviewed the progress. Eviction filed, debts confirmed, and allies who saw the truth. I added Morrison's report to Bob Harrison's in my evidence file. In banking, I had relied on patterns, and the pattern here was clear. Harry wasn't only entitled, he was desperate and dangerous. Pressure would only drive him to more reckless acts. I had to be ready. Tomorrow, I would call his creditors, not to pay his debts, but to ensure they knew he had no claim to my property. The truth remained the strongest defense, and in a town like Kalispell, news spread fast. By Friday, I knew I needed to guide the narrative. At the post office, Mrs. Henderson from church cornered me. She was known for spreading whatever she heard. "Clark, I've heard troubling things about family issues. Is everything all right?" I chose my words carefully. "Tiffany and Harry asked me to move out, so I did. Sometimes children must handle their own responsibilities." Her eyebrows rose. "They asked you to leave your own house? But didn't you pay for their wedding and the down payment?" I simply nodded. The facts would speak on their own. At E. Miller's Hardware, where I'd once worked part-time, the staff gathered around after hearing my explanation. They were shocked at Harry's behavior and angered at his financial dependence. "You paid their tuition?" Dave asked, shaking his head. "Harry told people his family was helping you with mortgage payments." Harry said many things that weren't true, I answered calmly. Tom, the owner, frowned. "That explains why he always seemed to have money but avoided extra shifts, likely at the casino," added Sarah. I left knowing the truth would spread quickly, faster than any formal announcement. Finally, I stopped at St. Mark's Lutheran Church, where Pastor Williams was preparing for the weekend service. He welcomed me into his office, offering coffee and a chair that had supported many troubled parishioners over the years. "Clark, a few people have mentioned concerns about you. Can you help me understand what's going on?" I respected Pastor Williams' directness. He wasn't searching for gossip. He was simply trying to help a member of his congregation. "Pastor, I've been financially supporting my daughter and her husband for 5 years. Last weekend they told me that staying in the house required me to follow Harry's rules. I decided to leave rather than accept that condition. That must have been very painful," he said. "It was clarifying," I admitted. "I love my daughter, but I won't be treated like a servant in my own home." Pastor Williams nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes loving someone means letting them face the consequences of their choices. It sounds like you've shielded them from those consequences for a long time. Far too long," I agreed. On my way back to the motel, I stopped at Annie's coffee shop for an afternoon cup. The place was busy with the usual Friday crowd, retirees, workers off duty, and mothers with strollers. I found a small table in the corner and listened to the conversations around me. Harry owes money all over town. Clark Miller's been covering their bills for years. Strange how they live so comfortably on just his income. The information was spreading exactly as I expected. Small towns worked like living systems, processing news quickly and separating truth from rumor with collective wisdom. As I was leaving, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor of 20 years. Clark, I hope you don't mind me calling. There's been a lot of shouting at the house lately. Mostly Harry, but Tiffany too. Yesterday the police drove by twice. Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Patterson. I appreciate you keeping an eye on things. Are you safe? Do you need anything? Her genuine concern reminded me how community support shows itself in different ways. I'm fine, thank you. Just taking things day by day. That evening I sat in my motel room, reflecting on the day's conversations. Social pressure was growing naturally, without any effort on my part. People recognized injustice when it was plain to see. My phone rang again, an unknown number but with a familiar area code, Likely one of Harry's creditors. I let it go to voicemail. This is Marcus Webb from Frontier Financial Services. We're trying to reach Harry Thompson regarding a past due account. Please call us at your earliest convenience. They were contacting me because Harry had likely used my house as his address on credit applications. More proof of his deception. More evidence that he had planned to push his debts onto me. I deleted the message and opened my laptop. Time to update my evidence file. I should have known they wouldn't give up easily. Harry was never one to retreat quietly. Saturday morning began peacefully. I was reviewing bank statements over coffee. When the call started, first Tom from the hardware store, then Mrs. Henderson, then Pastor Williams. Each brought troubling news. Clark, I think you need to know what Harry's saying, Tom told me, his voice tight with anger. He came in here this morning loud and confident, telling everyone you abandoned them without warning, said you promised to always support them, then turned your back out of spite. What exactly did he say? I asked. That you're having some kind of breakdown. That you forced them out because Tiffany wouldn't let you control every decision. He's also claiming there's a family medical emergency and you're refusing to help. I thanked Tom and hung up, already working through the implications. Harry was desperate enough to start a public relations campaign, which meant his creditors were closing in. The next call confirmed it. Mr. Miller, this is Detective Morrison. I wanted to let you know, Harry Thompson came in this morning to file a complaint for elder abuse. He claims someone at the bank is manipulating you into making bad financial decisions. Complete nonsense, of course. But what he was really trying to do was create an official record of my supposed mental instability. I told him that would require medical evidence and witness statements, things he clearly didn't have. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Tiffany. Dad, please answer. I know you're upset, but there are things you don't understand. Her voice was heavy with tears. I'm pregnant, Dad. The stress from all this is making me sick. The doctor says if things don't calm down, I could lose the baby. I felt a familiar twist in my stomach, the same protective instinct that had left me vulnerable to their manipulation for years. But there was something in her tone that seemed forced, desperate, in a rehearsed way. Congratulations on the pregnancy, sweetheart. When did you find out? Last week, right before everything fell apart, she said, her voice breaking convincingly. Dad, I can't lose my baby because of money problems. You always said family comes first. Family does come first. That's why I spent $60,000 on your education and $25,000 on your wedding. But what about now? What about your grandchild? Her question hung in the air. If she was truly pregnant, and if there was a real medical crisis, then my decisions could have consequences I didn't intend. But the timing felt far too convenient, the manipulation too familiar. Tiffany, have you seen a doctor about these pregnancy concerns? A pause. I have an appointment next week. Which doctor? Dr. Richards at the women's clinic. I knew Dr. Richards. Martha had been her patient for years. I'll call her office to see how I can help with the medical costs. Dad, you don't need to call. If there's a genuine medical emergency involving my grandchild, I want to help. Dr. Richards will know the best course of action. Tiffany's voice turned sharp. You can't just call my doctor. That's private. You're right. She can call me directly to discuss payment options. The line went dead. An hour later, I was walking downtown when I spotted Harry outside First National Bank. He was speaking loudly to anyone who would listen, his voice carrying that familiar edge of aggression. He's lost his mind, Harry told a small group. Old fool thinks everyone's stealing from him, even threw out his pregnant daughter for no reason. I approached calmly. The crowd noticed me before Harry did, and their expressions shifted as they realized who I was. Harry turned, his face red with anger. There he is, the man who abandoned his own family. Hello, Harry, I said evenly. How's the gambling debt situation going? The accusation hit hard. Murmurs rippled through the group as people began piecing things together. You're crazy, Harry sputtered. I don't know what you're talking about. $18,000, I said. According to Detective Morrison, Glacier Peaks Casino, mostly poker tables. Incredible how much someone can lose when they're not paying their own bills. Harry's face darkened. He stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. You senile old fool, you can't just... I can document every dollar I've spent supporting you for 5 years, I cut in. Can you document where your paychecks went? The crowd was focused now, carefully weighing every word. Harry realized he had lost control of the story. Come on, he muttered, pushing through the crowd. This isn't over, Clark. Watched him storm off, noticing several people pulling out their phones. The truth would be on social media within the hour. Back at the motel, I opened my laptop and began recording the day's events. Harry's attacks were failing because they were built on lies that could not survive scrutiny. The community knew me well enough to see through his accusations of incompetence and cruelty. But Tiffany's pregnancy claim still weighed on me. If it was true, the situation was far more complicated. I needed proof before moving forward. I dialed Dr. Richards's office. If there was a real emergency, I would help, but I refused to be manipulated by another false crisis. Harry's public threats, however, had gone too far. I picked up my phone again and called Detective Morrison. James, we need to talk. Harry's behavior today shows a pattern that worries me. How so? He confronted me in public, made threatening gestures in front of witnesses, and he's clearly losing control. I looked out the motel window toward downtown. I'd like to file a formal complaint and discuss protection options. Come in tomorrow morning, Morrison said. Bring any documentation you have. But I didn't have to wait. An hour later, there was a knock at my door. It was Steve Brennan, the Pine Lodge night manager. Mr. Miller, the man who had been shouting in our parking lot earlier, returned about 20 minutes later. He stood outside your door for nearly 5 minutes before leaving, which made several guests uneasy. Steve, a retired Army sergeant, had seen enough conflict to recognize when trouble was brewing. Did he say anything specific? I asked. He muttered something about teaching old fools lessons, Steve replied. I've got it on the security cameras if you need proof. Security footage meant solid evidence of Harry's threats on private property. Steve, would you be willing to provide that video to the police? Of course, a man like that shouldn't be frightening senior residents. The next morning, I went to the police station carrying Steve's USB drive with the footage and a detailed timeline of Harry's escalating behavior. Detective Morrison examined the material carefully. Clark, this shows a consistent pattern of intimidation. Together with what I saw at the bank yesterday, we have enough for a restraining order. What does that involve? I asked. It's a legal restriction preventing Harry from coming within 500 feet of you or your property. If he violates it, he can be arrested immediately. Jim leaned back in his chair. There's something else. Harry consulted a lawyer Friday about adverse possession laws. The word struck me like a splash of cold water. Squatters' rights. Exactly. He was researching if he could claim your home by proving continuous residence. In Montana, it takes 5 years of hostile occupation. They've been there 3. His plan was to wait 2 more, then file a claim. I was stunned. Harry hadn't just been freeloading. He had been setting up a long-term plan to take my family home through legal loopholes. Does he actually have any claim? I asked. None. Adverse possession requires hostile occupation without permission. You allowed him to stay and he never paid rent or property taxes. There's no legal foundation. Jim opened a file folder. But it does show premeditation. He's been planning this for years. And the restraining order? With this evidence, I can fast-track it. You'll have it this afternoon. I left the police station with a new awareness of my son-in-law's character. The beer incident hadn't been about control. It had been about maintaining a deception that would ultimately lead to stealing my house. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone. It was time for some important calls. The first was to Marcus Webb at Frontier Financial Services, one of Harry's creditors who had been contacting me. Mr. Webb, I'm returning your call about Harry Thompson. I need to clarify something. He no longer lives at my address and has no legal claim to my property. He listed my home as his residence on his credit applications, but he was only a guest. I evicted him last week. If you're looking for him, he works at Mountain View Auto Dealership on Highway 93. The second call was to Continental Credit Recovery. This is Clark Miller. You've been calling about Harry Thompson's debts. For the record, he no longer lives at my address and he has no ownership interest in my property. Each call was short and precise. I wasn't covering Harry's debts or giving away personal details, only correcting the false address he had used to avoid creditors. By noon, I had spoken with 6 collection agencies. Harry's carefully built facade was beginning to collapse. That afternoon, Judge Morrison signed the restraining order. Harry Thompson was now legally barred from coming within 500 feet of me or my home. Any violation meant immediate arrest. Driving back to Pine Lodge, I felt the reassurance of justice taking effect. Harry had spent 3 years preparing to steal my home. Now he couldn't even set foot near it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over, old man. I forwarded it to Detective Morrison and blocked the number. Evidence gathering had become second nature. Monday morning, I filed the restraining order officially. By noon, I was watching Harry's plans crumble from every direction. The courthouse clerk stamped the document firmly. Mr. Miller, this order is effective immediately. Any approach within 500 feet is a violation. I thanked her and walked out, knowing the sheriff's deputy would deliver the papers to Harry within hours. My phone rang. It was Mike Brennan from Mountain View Auto, Harry's employer. Mike was a decent man whose dealership thrived on trust. Clark, I need to ask. You directly. Are the things Harry has been saying true? What has he been saying? That you had some kind of breakdown, that you threw him out because of dementia. He's telling people there's a family emergency and you're refusing to help. Mike's tone carried doubt. Clark, I've known you for 20 years. This doesn't sound like the man who co-signed my son's first car loan. Mike, Harry gave me an ultimatum. Obey him or leave. I chose to leave. There is no medical emergency and my mental health is just fine. My banker, lawyer, and the police detective can all confirm that. There was a long silence. I was afraid of that. 3 customers mentioned today that Harry owes them money. 1 saw him at the casino. This is hurting my business. I'll have to let him go. I can't risk my dealership's reputation. 20 minutes later, I was having coffee at Annie's when I saw the first debt collector arrive at my former house. Continental Credit Recovery, identified by the sign on the car door. I had spoken to them Friday about Harry's false address. My phone rang. It was Tiffany. Dad, there are men at the house asking about Harry's debts. They want to know about our income, assets, everything. Her voice was trembling with panic. What did you tell them? I told them the truth, that Harry doesn't live here and doesn't own the property. But they're talking about garnishing wages and seizing assets. Dad, I don't understand. Sweetheart, that's what happens when someone borrows money they cannot repay. Those were consequences Harry created, not me. He now owes $18,000. How could that even happen? She truly hadn't known the full story. Gambling debts. Glacier Peaks Casino, according to Detective Morrison. Silence followed on the line before she whispered. He told me he was working overtime those nights. I'm sorry you're finding out like this, Tiffany. The sheriff's deputy was here too. He served Harry some legal documents. Harry's been shouting and throwing things ever since the restraining order. Harry was beginning to realize his choices were gone. Dad, he keeps talking about leaving town. He says there's nothing left here for him. Her voice cracked. What am I supposed to do? Make decisions based on who Harry really is, not who you wanted him to be. That evening, I parked across from my old house and watched everything unravel. 3 different creditor vehicles had already been there during the day. Mrs. Patterson next door waved sadly. She had been observing the chaos like any concerned neighbor would. Through the living room window, I saw Harry and Tiffany arguing. His movements were aggressive and frantic. Hers were defensive, frightened. The fantasy marriage, funded by my sacrifices, was collapsing under the weight of reality. My phone buzzed. A text from Steve at Pine Lodge. That guy tried to enter the building again. I told him about the restraining order. He left, but he was furious. I forwarded the message to Detective Morrison. Harry had broken the restraining order within hours of being served. His desperation was pushing him into recklessness, dangerous, yet predictable. A man with gambling debts, no job, and legal pressure had only 2 paths: face his responsibilities or run. Based on what I knew of Harry, running seemed far more likely. I drove back to Pine Lodge thinking about Tiffany. If Harry left town to escape creditors, what would she do? Would she follow him out of loyalty to a man who deceived her? Or would she finally recognize him for who he was and choose differently? Either way, the consequences were now hers. For 5 years, I shielded them from reality. That ended the day they forced me to choose between my dignity and their demands. I chose dignity. Now they had to choose their own future. 2 days of watching their struggle was enough. On Wednesday morning, I called Tiffany. Meet me at the diner, just you. I can't leave Harry alone right now, Dad. He's struggling with everything happening. Then we have nothing to discuss. The restraining order prevents me from being near him anyway. A long silence. Where do you want to meet? Main Street diner. 2 o'clock. Back corner booth. I arrived early and chose a booth away from the street, wanting the focus to remain on our words, not distractions. When Tiffany arrived, she looked older than her 28 years, stress lines around, her eyes nervously twisting her purse strap. She sat opposite me and spoke quickly. Dad, I know you're upset, but Harry's lost his job and these debt collectors won't stop. The phone rings constantly. People come to the house demanding money we don't have. I waited for her to finish, then answered calmly. I'm offering you one chance to end this with dignity, Tiffany. What do you mean? Public acknowledgement of the truth. A full explanation of how much I've supported you both and why I finally walked away. Her face flushed. You want me to humiliate myself in front of everyone? I want you to tell the truth. That's not humiliation, it's honesty. What kind of acknowledgement? I had thought through exactly what justice required. A church announcement during testimony time, a letter to the Tribune, a Facebook post visible to all our mutual connections, full disclosure about college tuition, wedding costs, mortgage payments, and the ultimatum that drove me away. Dad, people will think, they'll think you had a father who sacrificed his retirement for your happiness, and that you took it for granted until it was gone. Tiffany stared at her untouched coffee. What about Harry? Harry is no longer part of any equation involving me. The restraining order is permanent. If you stay with him, that's your choice. But it means choosing him over me. You're asking me to choose between my husband and my father. I'm asking you to choose between a man who threatened me and the man who raised you. The fact you see them as equal says a lot about how far we've drifted. She was quiet for a long time, then asked, What about the house? It's been in our family for generations. It's going to the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative. 3 veteran families will live there. People who understand service and sacrifice. The will is already changed, signed, and filed. I kept my voice steady but firm. Even if you do everything I've asked, the house is not coming back to you. That decision is final. Why? Because reconciliation has to be built on Love, not inheritance. For 5 years you treated me as a funding source. I need to know if there's anything left between us beyond money. Her eyes filled with real tears this time, not the manipulative ones I had grown used to. I'm sorry, Dad, I truly am. I never meant for it to go this far. Sorry isn't enough anymore. The whole town saw how you and Harry treated me in my own home. They saw you choose his demands over my dignity. Words won't fix that. Only actions will. What if I can't do it? What if I can't stand in front of everyone and admit how wrong we were? Then you'll live with the consequences. Harry will likely leave town to escape his debts. Men like him always run. You can go with him, or you can stay and rebuild your life with honesty. That's your choice. And if I do what you're asking, then maybe, over time, we can build a relationship, not based on money, guilt, or obligation, but on mutual respect as adults. Tiffany wiped her eyes. How long do I have to decide? Sunday morning. Church starts at 10. If you're not there to speak the truth, I'll know your choice. She stood slowly, looking older and more fragile than when she'd arrived. Dad, do you think you could ever forgive me? I looked at my daughter and saw glimpses of the little girl who once braided dandelions into crowns and begged for bedtime stories about brave princesses. Forgiveness and trust are different, Tiffany. I forgave you the day I left instead of fighting. But trust has to be earned back. One honest act at a time. She nodded and walked away, shoulders heavy with the weight of her decision. I stayed in the booth, watching her drive off. Sunday was 4 days away. By then I would know whether my daughter chose truth over comfort, responsibility over misplaced loyalty. When Sunday morning came, the sky was clear and cold. I walked into St. Mark's, wondering if Tiffany had the courage to tell the truth. The sanctuary was more crowded than usual. Word had spread about a family announcement. I sat in my usual pew 3 rows from the front and waited. Pastor Williams began the service with hymns and readings, but the air was filled with anticipation. When testimony time arrived, Tiffany rose from the back row. She looked small walking down the aisle, but her steps were steady. At the podium, she held the edges tightly and faced the congregation. I need to tell you something about my father. Her voice carried through the silent church. For the past 5 years, Clark Miller has supported my husband and me financially. He paid $160,000 for my college education when I could have gone to a state school. He paid $25,000 for my wedding when Harry's family couldn't contribute. Murmurs spread across the sanctuary. These specific numbers revealed sacrifices that made the truth impossible to ignore. He gave us his family home, the house left to him by his parents, where he had lived with my mother for 2 decades. When we fell behind on the mortgage, he paid it. When we needed groceries, utilities, or car insurance, he covered it all while surviving on Social Security. Her voice grew firmer as she went on. 3 weeks ago, when my father refused to take my husband's commands like a servant, we gave him a choice: obey Harry or leave his own home. My father chose to walk away rather than lose his dignity. The room fell into silence. Even the children seemed to sense the weight of her words. I stood by and watched as my husband disrespected the man who had sacrificed his retirement for our well-being. I stayed loyal to someone who threatened my father instead of standing by the man who raised me with love and patience. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice held steady. I'm here because my father gave me one last chance to choose truth over pride. I was wrong. Harry was wrong. My father deserved respect and gratitude, not ultimatums and demands. She turned toward me. Dad, saying I'm sorry will never be enough for what we put you through, but I hope it's a beginning. The congregation broke into supportive murmurs as Tiffany returned to her seat. Pastor Williams stepped up to the podium, his own eyes wet. Sometimes the greatest courage is admitting our mistakes openly. Tiffany has shown us that courage today, and her father has shown us what dignity looks like under pressure. After the service, people approached with handshakes, embraces, and kind words. Mrs. Henderson squeezed my hand. We always suspected you were helping them financially, Clark. What we didn't know was how they repaid your generosity. Tom from the hardware store clapped my shoulder. That took real strength. Setting boundaries is never easy, especially with family, but the most meaningful moment came when Tiffany found me outside the church. The letter to the Tribune comes out Wednesday. The Facebook post goes up tonight. She paused. Harry left town yesterday, packed up while I was at work, and disappeared. No address, no note, nothing. I wasn't surprised. Men like Harry always left when faced with consequences. I'm sorry your marriage ended this way. I'm not, she said quietly. I filed for divorce this morning, found out he'd been gambling on my credit cards without telling me. The debts are worse than I realized. 3 months later, I stood in the front yard of my former family home, watching 3 veteran families move into transitional housing created by the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative. The property had been renovated into separate apartments, giving each family privacy while sharing common spaces. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, newly returned from deployment, guided her children toward the donated playground equipment. Mr. Miller, this means the world to us. Thank you for choosing veterans for this gift. Veterans understand sacrifice, I replied. This home should serve those who have earned it. My own life had settled into calm routines at the UE lakeside cabin I purchased, with money no longer drained by ungrateful dependents. Morning coffee on the deck overlooking Flathead Lake, afternoons fishing, evenings reading. Simple pleasures that felt like luxuries after years of financial strain and family conflict. The cabin was modest but perfect. 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a dock for my small fishing boat. My phone buzzed with a text from Tiffany. Dad, I'm 3 months into counseling and learning a lot about healthy relationships. Could we meet for coffee? I want to earn your trust back one step at a time. I smiled, watching an osprey fishing in the shallows. Tiffany had kept her promise about the public acknowledgments. The newspaper letter was honest and thorough, and the Facebook post drew dozens of supportive comments from people who finally understood the truth. More importantly, she was taking responsibility for repairing our relationship, not expecting forgiveness without effort. I typed back, "Coffee sounds good. Saturday morning at the diner." Her reply came instantly. "I'll be there. And Dad, thank you for not giving up on me." I set the phone down as the osprey lifted from the water with a fish in its claws. Sometimes patience and dignity are rewarded, even when the burden feels endless. The sun set over the Rockies, casting golden light across the lake. In the distance, children laughed at the Veterans Housing Complex, families building new lives in the home where I had learned the difference between generosity and enabling. Justice was served, dignity preserved, and perhaps a daughter finally, ready to rebuild trust through action, not manipulation. It had been worth the wait. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.